Morning, guys. Welcome, welcome. Hello, hello, hello. Hi, everyone. I hope you've all had a great morning. All right. Hello, Holly. Hey, guys. Megan.
Hi.
There we are. Ready? Gang's all here. Jade, Simon. This is my favorite class. No. Let's tell that to everyone. No, I don't. Oh, Madison, you look exactly like one of my friends. Just for a split second, I thought, whoa, what are you doing here? And I was like, that is not Mel, that is Madison. All right. Hey guys, good morning. Hope you're all having a fabulous morning in lockdown. Feels a bit like Groundhog Day. I feel like class is coming around so quickly, like you literally blink and then it's ready for next week. But today's class, it's a bit of a quicker one. We're going to do that Mentimeter quiz again, so you can get that up in the background whilst I'm just talking and everyone's coming in. Hey guys, so bit of a quicker one, but there is like a lot of content. So again, it's like a bit of a speech from me. This time I haven't recorded anything, so I'll be talking through it with you guys. But yeah, it is again a bit of like a longer tutorial in terms of content, but in terms of duration, it's shorter. You know what I mean? Okay, so get that Menti app up. Let me tell you, I need to tell you what the number is. Okay. Share screen. I've become a Zoom expert over these past few weeks. So here we go. Hopefully no more technology issues. I actually did a Zoom with I have a family friend who's she's a midwife, and she has to do like some midwife education at the hospital. Like she teaches the other midwives there, and she didn't know how to do Zoom, so I had to get on a Zoom and show her how to use Zoom from her end. And she was crying that she was that happy that she finally figured out how to use it, that she started crying, and just glad that this is all put to use for someone. I'm sure you guys are used to it now. You guys had to do Zoom for last semester, which I didn't know. If you're in first year now, you have to do Zoom for Sport and Society or something like that. Yeah. So you're all experts now as well. Okay, 1826. Give it a couple minutes for some people to still come onto that Menti app. There's only a couple questions in this quiz. Maybe you want to have a quick flick through your lab book from last week, because there will be questions from last week. See what we did, get a little bit of that reminder going, get the brain going, ready for a fun class on the elbow and the wrist. And then yeah, we'll get into it. I'm a bit loopy today. I actually find that I teach better when I'm tired, because I just start to go a bit weird. Like, I don't know, things flow a bit better. I feel like maybe I'm funnier. Maybe I just tap into another level. And last night, I have my cat, he's sick, and he got a bit sick last night, which was very upsetting, but he seems to be doing better this morning, which is good. But I had a bit of a sleepless night, so I'm running on the adrenaline. I've got the adrenaline pumping through me. I'm ready to go, give it a good performance for this class. Let's get into it. So first question we want to know is, which muscle initiates glenohumeral abduction? So remember from last week, we've got our two agonists of abduction, supraspinatus and deltoid. One of them initiates that movement. What that means is from anatomical position, which one starts abduction? Good, it is the supraspinatus. Well done. So supraspinatus, 0 to 30 degrees is the agonist, and then after 30 degrees, the deltoid joins in. Now, remember, we'll go into the next question, but the normal range for hyperextension at the glenohumeral joint. So this was from that page where we had to measure the range of motion, which we didn't actually end up being able to do. But in hyperextension, so that's back behind this way here, how much degrees is normal? Whoa, I think I'm above average. No, probably not. 50, good. So 50 degrees. If I cheat, I can go up 90. See, impressive, right? Okay, next one. So remember with that, you guys only need to know the normal ranges of motion, which is 50 for hyperextension, and then there's the other ones for flexion and for internal, external rotation. Okay, upward and downward rotation occurs simultaneously with which actions at the glenohumeral joint? These always occur together. You can't have one without the other. So what must happen at the glenohumeral joint for there to be upward and downward rotation at the shoulder girdle? Oh, okay, a bit of a split, but it is adduction and abduction. So remember, with all the bony landmarks at the shoulder, if I tried to abduct my glenohumeral joint without the scapula moving, there would be bone on bone. It would get stuck. I couldn't move. So my scapula needs to move with my glenohumeral joint to allow for abduction and adduction. So really important to remember this. You can't have one without the other. If there is adduction and abduction happening at the glenohumeral joint, there must be upward and downward rotation going on at the shoulder girdle. That has to be, right? They're always together, always. Okay, last question, only a bit of a shorter quiz today. Let's see what this last question is. Ratio of internal to external rotation at the glenohumeral joint. So we saw this number come up last week. You know, the internal rotators are stronger. Remember, I always forget the name of this. It's like it just will not stick in my head. Arm wrestling, internal rotation, pectoralis major, 3:2, very good. So that was a 3:2 ratio. I think if you put that in percentage, it's like 60-40. I could be wrong, but I think it is 60-40. All right, awesome. Onto the elbow. Now, in the last class, I told them, because again, this class is a bit of me talking for the main part of it, I guess, which could be good, could be terrible. I'll let you guys decide. But I'm happy for you to chuck your cameras off if you want. I know the Zoom fatigue is real, and sometimes it can be like tiring looking at yourself on the camera. So if you want, chuck your cameras off. I'll just talk through it myself. I'll pretend you're all smiling and nodding along with me. If you want to keep your camera on, you're welcome to, but I completely understand that sometimes it's a lot easier to concentrate when you're not looking at yourself. So it's up to you, but I'm happy to talk to a blank screen at the moment. I feel like I've got the high to be able to do that today. So, elbow. Now, when we're looking at the elbow, actually, first off, I'm going to talk down the arm. So I may or may not stay in the correct order of your lab book, but I will cover everything. So it's up to you whether you want to take notes separately and then go through and fill out the lab book, or try to follow along with your lab book. But just know I might jump back and forth just to do what makes sense to speak it through. So we're going to start proximal, work distally down the arm, and go through everything that we need to learn today about the elbow, the wrist, and the hand. First things first, bones. So first bone of the upper arm, the humerus. It's a long bone. We've got the ball at the top, which makes that glenohumeral joint. We're not interested in that today. We did it last week. Today, we want to look at the distal end. And there's a lot going on at the distal end of the humerus here. We've got these sticky outy bits on the side, our medial and lateral epicondyles. You can make my screen bigger. So if I look small to you right now, you can change your view to make it bigger so that you can see the bones more clearly if you'd like to do that. So these sticky outy bits, medial, lateral epicondyle. Now on my body, easy to find, easy to palpate. You just bend your elbow and you can feel them right there. Medial one sticks out more than the lateral one. So medial epicondyle sticking out, lateral epicondyle. We also have the trochlea. Now the trochlea is this hourglass shape right here. So it's this hourglass shape, wraps around the distal end of the humerus all the way around and comes to the back. On the back, we have the hole. This was called the olecranon fossa. So remember that hole at the back, olecranon fossa there. There's going to be something going into that as we flex and extend our elbow. If we look back at the front, so we have the trochlea, which is the hourglass. Next to the trochlea, we have this circle sort of protruding here. That is called the capitulum. You can see it in your lab book as well. You have a picture as well with all of these things labeled. So the capitulum. Now, above the trochlea and above the capitulum, we have two other little holes. They're a bit harder to see on the model. You can see them probably better with the shading in the lab book. So above the trochlea is this hole called the coronoid fossa, right there. And then above the capitulum is a little divot called the radial fossa. So that's going to be very important for us when we're talking about the elbow joint. We know that with the bones of the forearm, so the radius and the ulna, it's really the ulna that creates the elbow. The radius doesn't really do much at the elbow, but we know that the radius plays a bigger role at the wrist. So at the elbow, it's really the ulna that creates our elbow joint. So let's look at some of the landmarks on the ulna. Firstly, we can tell this is the ulna, it's got the U. So probably the most important landmark that we all remember is the olecranon process, or the olecranon. It's just this pointy part sticking out the back here. Some people have really pointy ones. Other people have more blunter ones. You can feel it easily. It's the part that sticks out on your elbow, the pointy bit. So that's the olecranon. It's sometimes called the olecranon process or just the olecranon. So whichever one you decide you'd rather call it, I'm happy for you to do that. Then we have the trochlear notch. So now we're talking on the other side of the U. So olecranon is on the outside of the U, and then on the inside of the U, we have this trochlear notch here, which creates the this sort of most distal end of the U, trochlear notch. I have a great photo. I took a screenshot of someone who I follow on Instagram. They put up a story and they were skateboarding at the skate park, and they have a fracture, and the fracture literally cuts off the whole olecranon and trochlea. Like, this is just floating. I'm going to find it. I took a screenshot of it. I didn't ask him if I could show it to my class, but I trust that you guys won't send any weird messages. All right, so I'm going to find that later. Remind me if I forget. So trochlear notch is going to meet with the trochlea on the humerus. So that's where those two bones come together. The trochlear notch moves around the trochlea. And then, of course, it's the olecranon on the ulna that disappears into the olecranon fossa on the humerus. So really cool stuff happening at the elbow. We have the olecranon process disappearing and locking into the trochlea. So if you think about like how you lock out your elbow, you straighten your elbow out, you lock it out. This is a really strong position for the elbow joint. The force is distributed. The force can go through the elbow joint when it's locked out very well. So like, think about you're doing a plank. You're going to lock out your elbows. That's your strongest position. And some people have very deep olecranon fossa, or just very mobile elbow joints. So they actually, when they lock out their elbow, you've all got a friend who does this. It's normally, you know, that friend who you've got who does gymnastics, and their elbows are like, whoop, like they go out way further than everyone else's. If anyone's got that, turn your camera on and show us for a little show and tell. But you guys know what I mean, that person with that really sticking out arm, they can lock, they've got like that double jointed elbow where when they lock out the elbow, the arms bend like the other way. So that's what's happening right here. Now, like I said, in that locked out position, the elbow is very strong, can take a lot of force. If I push on it, very strong position for the elbow. However, if the elbow is bent, now all of a sudden, the force that goes through the elbow joint is a lot weaker, and we can get some sort of a dislocation of the humerus and the ulna like so, because when it's bent, those the olecranon process doesn't lock into the olecranon fossa. Now all of a sudden we have this weaker, more less stable joint. And do you guys watch Survivor? You know, in Survivor, this is something that I think about all the time, is when they do those challenges where they have to hold something over their head. And like you see them, they all start off like this and like, okay, good. Then they'll like start bending at the elbow. And what are you doing, you idiots? Keep your arms locked out. Like when you lock it out, the force is a lot less on the muscles. Whereas when you bend your arm, all of a sudden your muscles have to start working harder to keep you in that position, because you're no longer using the bone structure to lock it out and to take the load. So I don't know, like I've never been on Survivor. I think it's one of those things where when you watch it on TV, it seems so easy, but doing it in real life is probably a whole nother story. So it's just one of the issues I have with that TV show. The other issue I have with the TV show, who's watched Survivor this season? Are you guys watching it this season? Put your thumbs up if you are. Put your thumbs up reaction. Okay, we've got one person, Megan. Now, I'm sure a few others of you did. Thanks, Evelyn. But did you see in the first episode where with Brain's tribe, they kept getting them to say, the brain is the biggest muscle in the body. The brain is my biggest muscle. And I'm thinking that you're not a brain then, because the brain's not a muscle. Idiots. Anyway, sorry. Let's get back to the content. Enough Survivor. All right. So when the trochlea, or when the olecranon process goes into the olecranon fossa, locked out elbow, very strong position. The other cool thing at the elbow joint is, so we know the olecranon process goes into the olecranon fossa on the back, but something like this also happens at the front. The coronoid process, or the lip of the ulna here, goes into the coronoid fossa of the humerus, that little lump, that little hole there. So that's another sort of interesting feature on the elbow. So not only is that happening at the back where the olecranon goes into the olecranon fossa, it's also happening at the front where the coronoid process goes into the coronoid fossa and allows you to flex your arm to full range. So this joint between trochlear notch and the trochlea is essentially our elbow joint. And we see on this first page in the lab book that it's actually got a more specific name called the humero-ulnar joint. So the joint between the humerus and the ulna. Up until now, we've called it the elbow. We can still call it the elbow, but it's just knowing that in this elbow, there's actually more than one joint, which is what we're going to talk about now or next. So humero-ulnar. Another important feature of the humero-ulnar joint between the humerus and the ulna, where the bones articulate at the trochlea, is that, see the trochlea here? See how this part of the trochlea sticks down a lot more? It protrudes out on the medial side. So medial, remember medial epicondyle is more pointy. So this is the medial side of the trochlea. See how that sticks down more? Well, that actually is relevant because when the ulna attaches to the trochlea, this medial protrusion makes the ulna shoot out laterally. So you can see in the picture in your lab books and on the share screen right now, is that the humerus comes down straight. So we can see this line down here. It comes down straight, but then when we get to the forearm actually shoots out laterally. And that's because of that medial protrusion of the trochlea. And this right here is what we call the carrying angle of the elbow. And so it's normal to have the forearm shoot out laterally. Think about like if it didn't, you'd have a hard time walking because your hands would keep hitting your legs. But now they instead of coming out laterally like so, imagine if they were straight down, they'd keep hitting my legs as I'm walking. That would be very uncomfortable. So it's normal to have this angle, and it's normal to 10 to 15 degrees at this angle, and we call it 10 to 15 degrees of valgus. So that terminology valgus, you might have heard it before at the knee, and that's something that we'll revisit when we do the knee joint. But valgus just means that the distal end of the limb is more lateral to the midline. Remember, valgus with an L in it, V-A-L, L for lateral. So valgus means the distal end of the limb is more lateral. Varus is the opposite. So if the ulna came down medially, we would say that's elbow varus. So it's where the elbow angle would come down medially. So it's normal for us to have 10 to 15 degrees of valgus at the elbow. That's our normal. We can have excessive valgus, where if that angle was greater at 30 degrees, we'd call that excessive valgus. If the angle went medially, we would call that varus. So yeah, L for lateral, L for valgus, easy to remember that there. Normally, we don't really see, some people can be born with it, it can be a congenital type issue, but normally we see this happen with, it's a common fracture point for kids. Kids can fracture the distal end of the humerus, and as that sort of reforms and repairs, it can affect this carrying angle. So normally when we see an abnormal carrying angle, it's often due to a malformed fracture on the humerus, which is a common fracture site for children. Okay, next joint. So that's everything we need to know about the humero-ulnar joint. The next one is the humeroradial joint. So this is something new. This is the joint between the head of the radius and the capitulum. So these two bones actually meet each other like so. Humeroradial joint. So this is the trochlea. This is the capitulum. So trochlea, capitulum, which is just the rounded part. You can see they sit together like this. Now, the humero-ulnar joint that we've spoken about is still a hinge. It's still our elbow, synovial hinge, diathrotic, uniaxial, but the humeroradial joint, where these two bones meet, is a plane joint. So what do we guess when we don't know the type of joint? We guess a plane. So this is a synovial plane, diathrotic, non-axial joint. Nothing too relevant that we need to know about that humeroradial joint. Just know that it's there and it does form part of the wider elbow complex. All right, and then we have the proximal radio-ulnar joint. So between the head of the radius and the radial notch on the ulna. So remember, here's our ulna. The radial notch is this part that looks like it's been cut away on the side of the ulna here, just next to the coronoid process. We have that radial notch. So head of the radius is going to sit there as well. And that allows that rotation when we pronate and supinate our forearm. So pronation and supination of the forearm actually in the body looks like this. So this would be supination, the two bones next to each other, and then pronation, two bones flipped over. So supination, pronation. And the interesting thing about pronation is like the bones actually cross over the top of each other like that, like an X. See? It's very cool. So in terms of pronation and supination, there's a very important ligament, which was the annular ligament. So annular ligament wraps around the head of the radius here, and the annular ligament doesn't actually insert into the radius at all. It comes from the ulna, goes around, back into the ulna. See, doesn't actually insert onto the radius. So that's the annular ligament. Then we have two other ligaments, the radial collateral and the ulnar collateral. So where the annular ligament is, we have the radial collateral coming down from the humerus, inserting into the annular ligament. It sort of merges into the annular. So this is the radial collateral on the radius side. And then over here on the ulnar side of the elbow is the ulnar collateral ligament. So three ligaments at the elbow. We also have this thing on the front of the radius right here, and that is our bicep brachii tendon inserting into the radial tuberosity. We know that the bicep, it's important for elbow flexion. So if I grab onto this tendon here and I pull, there's elbow flexion, right? And it's also important for supination. So if you were to put your hand on your bicep right now, pronate and supinate, you can feel it turn on as you supinate your arm. You can feel it actually contract and squeeze. And you can also feel the tendon of your bicep. You're probably not going to be able to see it on me. Unfortunately, I do not have big muscles and I also have body fat. So it might not be very clear, but if you flex your elbow and you sort of contract your bicep a bit, you can take your fingers and dig in there and there's my bicep tendon. You guys see that? You can grab it on yourself. Here it is. You can feel that coming down, 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 and inserting into the radius here. There you go. There's the bicep tendon. Interesting thing about the bicep as well is that when we are in a supinated position, just like so, the bicep, it's very easy for the bicep to flex and to flex that elbow joint. It just grabs onto its insertion and it pulls it upwards, elbow flexion. However, when we're in a pronated position, when our arm is pronated, all of a sudden, my insertion is gone underneath. So my bicep has to come down, 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 underneath, wrap under to get to its insertion at the radial tuberosity. And what that means is that when we're in a pronated position, the bicep can't contract optimally because the tendon is being stretched. So think about it. Try this right now. Grab something, grab a pen or something, pretend it's really heavy. If you're in a supinated position and you do a bicep curl, you can feel your bicep working, right? You can feel it contracting. Now, go in a pronated position, again, do the same thing, squidgy. I can't feel my bicep turning on the same as it did when I was in a supinated grip. Supinated grip, I can feel it working hard. Pronated grip, oh, it's not really, it's just squishy, like it's not really turning on. And that's because of that action where the tendon is being sort of elongated and it's not being able to contract forcefully. That's a reason why if we do chin-ups, so you know chin-ups, you have your palms facing towards you, that's really gets the bicep involved. Pull-ups, where you have your palms facing away from you, pronated grip, the bicep's not going to help that much. So often, some people can find chin-ups a lot easier because they can use their bicep to help lift them up to the bar compared to a pull-up where the bicep isn't really at its strongest position. Same thing goes for, like, if you're doing bicep curls, most of the time you do them in a supinated grip, right? Your palms facing upwards. Some people do bicep curls where they lift the bar or the weight up in a supinated grip, then they pronate their hand and they lower the weight back down. And the reason that they do that is because we know that our muscles are strongest during an eccentric contraction. So it would almost be impossible to do bicep curls completely in this pronated grip. You'd have to go very light. But if you did the concentric part supinated, so you do the hard part supinated, then you turn it around, then you do the easier part pronated to make it harder for yourself. Then you can train the bicep in that eccentric action. Okay. What next? So I believe that's everything I want to say for the elbow. So let's start to move down the arm now. We'll have a look at the wrist. So come down here, looking at the wrist now. We know at the wrist joint, it's really the radius that makes up the wrist, and that's why the wrist is called the radiocarpal joint, radius to carpals. The ulnar is actually stops short of the carpals. So there's no attachment between the ulnar and the carpal bones. Right? It's very interesting. Now, the radiocarpal joint or the wrist, it's a condyloid joint. So synovial condyloid diarthrotic biaxial means it moves on 2 axes. So with my wrist, I can flex my wrist. That would be coming towards me. I can extend my wrist and also hyperextend it past midline. So flexion, 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 extension, 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 hyperextension coming out the back. Then I can also abduct and adduct the wrist joint as well. So that's the second axis. Now, because the condyloid joint is an oval within an oval, you can't rotate your wrist around. Some people will say, yes, I can. Look at that. That's not rotation of the wrist. That's pronation and supination of the proximal and distal radial ulnar joints. You can't rotate your wrist around. You can't rotate an oval within an oval. So those are our 2 axes: flexion, extension, abduction, and adduction. Now, in the anatomical position here, oh, gone black, there we are. In the anatomical position, here I am. So if I bring my arm or my wrist, my fingers towards myself, this would be adduction. And then if I went away from the body, that would be
developed like the tectonic plates and I don't even know, but it really
start learning about the tectonic plates. All right, so adduction is also called ulnar deviation. So ulnar is on the pinky side.
Clem, just on the book, it's a little bit confusing which one's which because it's facing the other way.
Yes.
Like the hands.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I'm going to clarify that for you right now. So
Thank you.
a great way to tell them apart is when we come, well, the ulnar is on the pinky side of the hand. The radius is on the thumb side of the hand, right? So coming towards the ulnar is called ulnar deviation, and coming towards the radius is called radial deviation. So instead of using adduction and abduction, it's actually a lot easier to use radial and ulnar deviation because you just look, okay, is it flexing towards the pinky? That's ulnar deviation. Or adduction, is it flexing towards the thumb? That's radial deviation or abduction. So in those pictures in your lab book, you can see picture A coming towards the ulnar deviation, adduction.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah.
Did we say abduction and adduction or ulnar deviation, radial deviation?
You can use either. I find it easier to use radial deviation and ulnar deviation just because, like what Holly pointed out, was that in this picture, it's harder to tell, is this adducting or adducting? But it is very easy to tell, okay, it's coming towards the ulnar, that's ulnar deviation. It's coming towards the radius, that's radial deviation. Does that make sense?
Yes, miss, thank you.
Great. So just so that you've got everything written down correctly, picture number A should be ulnar deviation or adduction, ADD. And then picture number B should be radial deviation or abduction, ABD. Cool. All right. Now, in these actions, they look simple, right? Ulnar deviation, radial deviation looks very simple. But what's going on inside the wrist is actually very, very complex. I have a video to show you guys of what's actually happening. All right, we're going to come back to these little pictures. But when you do radial and ulnar deviation, the carpal bones are actually moving lots. Like they're moving over the top of each other, this way, that way. It's quite complex. So you can see those movements here. In this video, you can see the radius, the red, the ulnar, the green. Then we have all of the carpal bones. Now watch as it starts to do radial deviation. So this would be radial deviation here, coming towards the radius. See how those bones literally all almost swap positions? They all come over the top of each other and stuff. And then ulnar deviation coming back the other way. So I'll just show you again. So see how much movement there are at the carpal bones during these actions? It means that it's quite complex what's going on inside that wrist when you're doing radial and ulnar deviation. And there are a few important ligaments that help to stabilize our carpal bones during this action. So here are all the ligaments within the hand, right? Who wants to learn all of these? Not me. So good news, we only need to learn three or four. So if you look at these pictures, first of all, make sure you get your orientation right. So palmar means you're looking at the palm side. Dorsal means you're looking at the back side of the hand. The ones that I want you guys to know about and to highlight are the palmar intercarpal ligaments, the ulno-lunate and the radiolunate. So the reason I said 3 or 4 was because there's actually 2 palmar intercarpal ligaments, and the radiolunate and the ulno-lunate are important as well. So highlight those in your lab book, and then you can also highlight the actual ligaments themselves. So once you highlight those ligaments, you should end up with this double V system here. So double V, the top V being the 2 palmar intercarpals, and then the bottom V being the ulno-lunate and the radiolunate ligaments as well. Now, when I abduct and adduct, or radial deviate and ulnar deviate my wrist, this double V system is going to be really important for stabilizing the carpal bones. There is another very important structure. Before I actually get to that, you're asked what's the difference between an intrinsic versus an extrinsic ligament or muscle at the wrist. So intrinsic is a ligament that goes from carpal to carpal. So the intercarpal ligaments are examples of intrinsic ligaments. The lunotriquetral is an intrinsic ligament. It goes from one carpal bone to another carpal bone. Whereas an extrinsic ligament is our ulno-lunate, from the ulna to a carpal bone. So this is coming from outside the wrist to within. And the radiolunate is also an example of an extrinsic ligament. So an intrinsic ligament or an intrinsic muscle is a muscle that, or a ligament that arises and finishes within the carpal bones. An extrinsic one is a muscle or a ligament that arises from a different bone and inserts into a carpal. So there's heaps of ligaments in the wrist and hand. There's so many muscles within the hand, I can't even begin to tell you. We don't learn them, which is fantastic. But the ones that we learn are pretty much all extrinsic muscles and extrinsic ligaments that cross over into the wrist. So our extensor carpi radialis is an example of an extrinsic muscle. All right. So another important structure when we're looking at the wrist and we're looking at the stability of the wrist during radial deviation and ulnar deviation is something called the triangular fibrocartilage complex. Now this is like a fibrocartilage disc, and it actually sits between that space where the ulnar and the carpal bones are. So remember, these 2 bones don't actually meet at all. We can draw in the triangular fibrocartilage complex, and it just helps to create stability at the ulnar side of the wrist, especially during those actions. So stabilizes the ulnar aspect of the wrist. Triangular fibrocartilage complex, it's sometimes called the TFCC. What do we reckon it's made out of? Fibrocartilage. Love it, it's in the name. Okay, good. So let's clear this. And we will continue talking. Now, not only is there lots of ligaments and lots of muscles and nerves and things going on at the wrist, we can see them. See all the tendons that go through your hand? You can see all those lines. Those are all muscle tendons, and they all cross the wrist. And there's a really cool place on your thumb. It's hard to see on me. I need to lose some weight so you can be able to see all my anatomical features. It's just too fluffy on me. So at the thumb, at the base of the thumb where the wrist is, there's two tendons, and if you like bring your thumb outwards like that, you should be able to see these two tendons form a little hole. I honestly don't have one. You can sort of see it there. There's a little hole. I'm sure some of you have got a much more pronounced one than me, but you can see there's this little hole between these two tendons. It's called the anatomical snuff box. Let me stop. Oh, let me keep sharing you, but if I Google a picture of it, you could probably see it more clearly. So let's get escape. Here we go. So see that red square there? There's ends up being like a little box or a little hole in here, and it's got its name because people put powdered substance in it and like sniff it upwards, you know. I don't know about that, but that's what the name is from. Anyway, so in this little snuff box here that's created by two tendons, and if you feel in there, you can feel the styloid process of the radius. So remember, radius on the thumb end has that pointy part. If you press into that snuff box right at the base of the thumb, you can feel the styloid process. It's the only thing that's not really moving. If you feel in there, you can feel lots of things moving around, but I can feel the styloid process staying stable. And then I can also feel as I deviate my wrist joint or abduct and adduct my wrist joint, I can feel something coming and then going. Like I can feel a bone and then it disappears when I move the other way. So a bone sticks out, then it disappears. I can't feel it anymore. That's the scaphoid bone of your carpals. And the scaphoid bone, it's a very commonly injured bone when you like fall on an outstretched hand. And if you fracture that bone, you'll know it if you press into that anatomical snuff box and they get the pain there. And that's something that is, it's a very important fracture to get fixed because there's not a very good blood supply to the scaphoid. So if you leave it, it doesn't heal well on its own. It needs to have some intervention. And if it doesn't heal well, that can lead to lots of different problems down the line. Now, the tendons that cross the wrist, all those tendons on the back of your hand, also means that the wrist and the fingers are really related because the tendons that move, or the muscles that move my fingers, also cross my wrist joint. So there's going to be some sort of relationship between them. And what we can see is if I have my hand completely flat here, and if I flex my wrist joint slightly, so I'm going to bring my palm downwards, as I do that, you guys try it at home. What happens to your fingers as you sort of do that? They splay outwards, right? They splay like this. That's because as I flex the wrist, there's tension that's put onto the tendons that cross the front or the top of my wrist joint, causing my fingers to extend and splay outwards. So flexing the wrist lengthens the tendons that cross the dorsal side of my palm and causes my fingers to extend like so. And it there's another way that this works as well. So let's say I want to grab this bone and I want to grab it really hard. So pretend this is the hand of someone else here and they're holding this bone and I want the bone. So I'm going to grab the bone off them and I'm going to grab it hard. I'm going to steal it from them. And when I grab something hard to hold on to this bone with a good amount of strength, I'm going to flex my fingers around it, obviously, but look at my wrist. My wrist is slightly extended as I grab onto that bone. So extension or hyperextension of the wrist allows the muscles that flex my fingers to contract more forcefully. So slight extension of the wrist actually allows the flexor muscles of the fingers to contract with force. So those two examples, they can confuse some people. I'm not sure how you guys are going right now. It's hard to tell on Zoom, but face to face, some people get a little bit stuck on them. But really, the overall idea that I want you guys to have from that question is that The muscles that affect the wrist or that affect the fingers also run across the wrist. So movements of the wrist are going to affect the ability of the muscles at our fingers to work. All right. Okay. Another important thing that's happening at the wrist is nerves. So we actually haven't spoken about nerves at all in this course up until now, and you should be thankful for that, because the worst part about anatomy is the nerves. So here we have a little bit of a practical example, and running between the carpal bones down into the hand is a nerve called the median nerve. And this nerve is implicated in carpal tunnel syndrome. So you may have heard someone with carpal tunnel syndrome. It's a very common issue at the wrist. Normally, you know, there's one person in the class who's probably had it before. But what happens with this carpal tunnel syndrome is we have this median nerve traveling down through the carpals that gets compressed. And that term carpal tunnel is exactly what it says it is. So there's actually a tunnel through the carpal bones, and that's created by this structure called the flexor retinaculum. So you can see the flexor retinaculum in the picture in your lab book. I've also got a picture here. Here we go, flexor retinaculum. It creates a roof over the carpal bones. It's a ligament, and it creates a roof over the carpal bones, forming this carpal tunnel. And what can happen is when this tunnel between the bones and the flexor retinaculum gets inflamed or compressed, we have an irritation of the median nerve. Ways it can get inflamed or compressed is too much computer work, this position right here. Also can be implicated in people with diabetes, because a common issue with diabetes is the inflammation that it causes in the body. So we can have an inflammation at the wrist that causes the compression on the nerve. With the same mechanism, also pregnancy. Pregnancy is big for, you know, there's lots of inflammation going on when you're pregnant, so that can also cause some compression of the median nerve. And there's a very easy way to test to see if you have carpal tunnel syndrome, which is the compression of the nerve. It's called the Phelan's test. Maybe highlight that in your lab book, Phelan's test. You never know when you might be asked what that is. So to do it, you just place the back of your hands together like this, and you press the back of your hands together really hard for 20 seconds. You guys can do it now. Press the back of your hands together, put some force into it, not too much, but like it's uncomfortable. I'm not crying over here, but put a bit of force into it, give it another 10 seconds. Mine, you know what? Even though mine didn't hurt in the last class, by the end of today, I can bet you that they'll be hurting. I'll have given myself carpal tunnel just by doing this exercise too many times. All right, and then stop. Any numbness, pain, tingling through the hand, you have just diagnosed yourself with carpal tunnel, unfortunately. All right, let's move on. Arches of the hand now. Very similar to the arches of the foot, we have 3 arches of the hand. And we know the hand, if you just relax your hand without even thinking about it right now, it ends up in this sort of position, 3D, right? A relaxed hand is not flat. This is not a relaxed hand. Like I'm having to forcefully put my hand in this position. The position that your hand is in when you die is like this, when you have no more control. That's a morbid scenario, but you know what I mean, like that's the position it'll end up in. So the reason for this arch or this 3D-ness of the hand is because of all of those intrinsic ligaments and the intrinsic muscles within the wrist and the palm and the hand. They help to maintain the arches. Now we have 3 of them. We have the proximal transverse arch, which crosses over the carpo-metacarpal joint. This arch, just as the arches in our feet have keystones, so do these arches in our hand. And the proximal transverse arch crossing the carpo-metacarpal joint has the keystone of the capitate. So the capitate, which is the carpal bone that lies in the middle here, is the keystone. It's the one that's got that blue marking on it. It's the big carpal bone, capitate. Then we have the distal transverse arch, which runs more distally, you guessed it, across the metacarpophalangeal joints here. So metacarpophalangeal joints. And again, it's got a keystone, which is the head of the third metacarpal. So if you look at your hand, the distal transverse arch is the arch over your knuckles. And if you line up your hand and look, what's the highest point? It's the head of the third metacarpal, the root finger, right? There you go. That's it. This arch is very mobile, meaning that from here, I can completely invert it. 1, 2, 3, inverted. See, it's gone back up the other way now. Normal arch, inverted arch. So it's just a mobile arch. Same as for the distal transverse arch, actually. So distal transverse arch, when it goes down longitudinally, this one doesn't have a keystone, but again, very mobile. I can invert it as well. See, it goes completely upside down now. Normal, upside down. Very mobile. Okay, on to our last station. So hopefully I haven't jumped around too much, but if we all are on station 6 now, that's fantastic. This is about prehension. Now, prehension is grabbing, grasping, grabbing something. That's what prehension means, the act of grabbing. We have 2 main classes of prehension. It's power and precision grip. So power and precision are the 2 main types of prehension. So before I talk about which one is which, something that's very important for prehension is our thumb. Now, the pollex is going to play a big role in the different types of prehension. Now, the pollex, we know it's a very special finger. That's because right here at the carpometacarpal joint of the thumb, we have a saddle. We have a saddle joint here. Very important. And that saddle joint gives us opposition. Opposition is this. And that is what makes us the apex species. This saddle joint right here. That's what makes us better than every other animal on Earth, basically. Well, I guess that's the idea. Allowed us to build tools, to get smarter. So that's that saddle. Yeah, Holly?
That's called precision.
This is called opposition. OPP. Yeah, this is something different. I'm not talking about prehension now. This is just an action of the thumb, given that we have that saddle joint. The thumb now is a bit different when it comes to flexion and extension and abduction and adduction. So with the fingers, when we flex our fingers, that looks like this, flexion and extension. So from the other angle, flexion and extension. At the thumb, it doesn't exactly work the same. It's sort of, the thumb is like on a 90-degree angle to the other fingers. So flexion of the thumb is actually coming forwards across the palm. So from this side, that would look like this, flexion, and then extension. So it's on a different angle, right? So across the palm for flexion and the other way for extension. Then we have abduction, which is coming forwards like so. So abduction and then adduction. Abduction, adduction, flexion, extension, flexion, extension, abduction, adduction. So think about like what we're about to talk about now with the prehension is abduction and adduction are very important. So abduction, taking away from the fingers, adduction, adding back to the fingers. Those are the 2 I want you to remember right now as we talk about these 2 different types of prehension. So abduction, taking away from the fingers, adduction, bringing back to the fingers, right? Now, if we look at the tennis racket example, that thumb is staying with the fingers. We're trying to adduct it to the palm. It's trying to stay with the fingers. So with the tennis racket, thumb adducted, this is a power grip. Whenever we have the thumb adducted, that's power grip. When we have the thumb abducted, now I'm gonna hold on to this thing of thumb away from the fingers, so it's not coming in like so, it's outwards. Thumb abducted is precision. So tennis racket is a power grip. Holding onto the ball is a precision grip. Important to remember those. Now, often we use a bit of both in everyday life. So we're asked which method is normally used when opening a tight jar in the kitchen. Now, I don't have a tight jar, but I have my water bottle. So when you open your water bottle and the lid is closed tightly, the first thing you do is you got to try and get rid of that first tension, you know, that hard part of opening the water bottle. So to do that, I'm going to grab onto the water bottle, see my thumb, and I'm going to twist it hard. So in the first part, this is a power grip, thumb adducted. Then after I get that first bit of tension off, I'm going to grab onto the lid and I'm going to, see the thumb? I'm going to swivel it around. Oh, I'm closing it again, like so. Precision. So with this opening of the jar example, we use power to first get that tension out of the lid. Then we go into precision to open up the lid. So that's the idea there with that question. But yes, I just want you to remember power is thumb adducted, precision is thumb abducted. And we're asked again, how can you adjust for the power grip to allow for increased control? So if I was to hold on to this humerus, but pretend it's a tennis racket or a sword or something, right? I'm holding onto it. I've got a strong, powerful grip here. This is power. My thumb is adducted. It's trying to come into the rest of the fingers. Now, to make this more precise, I can move my thumb. I can abduct it and put it in line with the longitudinal axis. So to make a power grip more precise, you can abduct the thumb and use that for precision. Have you guys seen The Princess Bride? You may be too young for The Princess Bride, but they do like the sword fighting and they hold their swords like this. On guard. Jung, do you do fencing? Do you do fencing with a grip like this or like this?
Yeah, the thumb on the the grip.
Like this.
Yeah,
so you've got
fencing grip. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's very important to have that precision as well as powerful, being able to hold on, but also being precise with where you're trying to stab the person. All right, and then we have some other types of grips as well. Now, these are types of precision grips. So these pictures here are classes of precision. So there's power, then there's precision, then underneath precision, we have these examples. Now, write down the names of these. Tip pinch, that's like picking up something with the tips of your fingers. You're gonna pick up something like a little tablet off the table. I don't know why you're picking up a tablet, but that's the first thing that came to my mind. Tip pinch, there you go. Then you have the lateral key pinch. That's where your thumb sits on like the long part of your finger, lateral key pinch. That's like if you were to pinch someone's skin, you might do a lateral key pinch, right? Pulp pinch. I hate the pulp pinch. I don't know what it is about this. It makes me very angry to have to tell you about the pulp pinch. It keeps me up at night, honestly. The pulp pinch. Who is grabbing something like this? I'm sorry. Who is doing this? No one. Anyway, you have to know what it is, but pulp pinch, not an effective way to pick something up. Then there's the palmar pinch, which is like holding a pen. Palmar pinch, holding a pen. So if you've got an example for each of those, that's good. Tip pinch, picking up something small from the table. Lateral key pinch, just think about the key. Pulp pinch. Then there's the palmar pinch, pen. Palmar, pen. All right, we have come to the end of the content, 11:59, perfect. So movement analysis now. We've only got one movement analysis and then a couple of questions on the next page. I think because this should be easy now, if this is not easy, let me know, because we're going to finish this class early, so there's going to be plenty of time at the end if you've been struggling with this, because remember, you're going to have one of these movement analysis next week in your exam, so this should be an easy one. So I think we're going to take 10 minutes, do the movement analysis, answer the questions on the next page, which are movement analysis related questions. We'll come back together, we'll go through it all, make sure we're all happy. And then if there's any other questions from the rest of the content, we'll go through it after then. So rather than doing the breakout rooms, I think we just chuck the cameras off. I'll put the timer on for 10 minutes and then we can come back together. All right, I'll see you guys in 10. All right, guys, welcome back. I hope that was all right for you all, and that was enough time to get through it. So I'm going to show you now what the answer is for the movement analysis so that you can mark yourself. Here we go. So have a look at what you put and compare that to the screen. If you have any questions, let me know, please. If you had anything different or wanted to add something that you think might be right, let me know, because remember, like, things can be right if you can argue for them. You know, if you think something's happening, then, you know, it's fair enough. You just got to put together a good argument for it. So it's always worth asking if you have something that I don't have here and you don't understand why. Yes.
Sorry.
No.
I don't know, we thought maybe hyperextension, or is it extension for glenohumeral?
Hyperextension is fine as well. I'll definitely mark that correct. It's both, right? So as you come down, it's like extension, 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 hyperextension, hyperextension, you know? So just given, I guess, it's the same muscles working, everything else should look the same. The hyperextensors are the same as the extensor muscles. So in this type of a scenario, either one of those is fine. But just make sure if it doesn't go past the midline, make sure you write extension and not hyperextension. But in this example, either option I'm happy with.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. So over the page, you had a couple of questions comparing the narrow and a wide grip push-up. Now, whenever you see narrow grip, I always think that elbows in, narrow grip, wide grip, elbows out. So that's going to change the action of the glenohumeral joint. So from flexion and extension, or flexion and hyperextension, we're now going to have horizontal adduction, horizontal abduction at the glenohumeral joint. And this is going to change the muscles that the exercise is targeting. So in the narrower grip at the glenohumeral joint, we're going to be targeting more about anterior deltoid, so the deltoid at the front, versus the wider grip, horizontal adduction, we're going to be targeting more of the pectoralis major. So the agonist for question number 2 is pectoralis major. Then we had the 2 different shoulder presses below. So in picture 1, we were told that the elbows point forwards. This would mean that the glenohumeral joint is flexing and extending. Then in the second picture, we were told that the elbow points laterally. This means abduction and adduction is taking place. So which one would you choose if you wanted to target the supraspinatus? Well, is the supraspinatus is involved in flexion and extension of the glenohumeral? Nope. It
Abduction.
is. Yeah, exactly. Abduction. That's definitely right. So the picture that we would choose is picture number 2. Now, some people say, well, in picture number 2, he doesn't go below 30 degrees. So why is it the supraspinatus? Well, the supraspinatus still does abduction. It's just the initiator. It just is the agonist from 0 to 30 degrees. So from 30 degrees and above, the deltoid does more work, but the supraspinatus is still helping. So even though it's not the agonist once we pass the 30 degrees, it still is helping the deltoid as well, but the deltoid is really the muscle that I guess has taken over. All right, guys, so make sure you keep practicing your movement analysis for next week. Remember, there's plenty of practice ones in the back of the lab book. You've also got the UPass classes as well. Good luck in your exam next week. Remember that the exams for this subject are very similar for structural. So remember how much of the structural anatomy exam, that first one, was on the lectures. This is going to be the same, right? So heavy focus on lectures, and there's also the movement analysis, of course. I don't believe there's going to be a face-to-face class next week. I think it's going to be just a recorded tutorial. So you just do your exam whenever that is, and then perhaps watch just a little YouTube video being the version of the, I guess, tutorial for that week. So just keep an eye out on your emails over the next week. It's important. as you get more info from Lee about what's going to happen, but that shouldn't affect how you study for the exam. All right, guys, thanks for coming to class. I'll see you all soon.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Louis.
Thank
you.
Sorry, so is the exam next week? Like it'll be online, right?
Yeah,
Okay, great.
yeah.
Cool. Easy. Thank you.
No worries.
Do you have the picture?
The picture. I forgot. Yes, I do have the picture somewhere. We've got to find it now. Okay. Maybe did I favorite it? All right, now this is the next task, is finding this picture.
Do you have another class after this?
I do, but it's not for a little while, so I can find it.
Easy.
So 2 more after this one. No, it's not in favorites. What's the time? Yeah, we finished quite early today, so that's good. Did anyone have any questions whilst I search for this photo? Erica, how are you going today?
I'm good. I just had a question.
Yes.
For our quiz, do we sit it in our class time or anytime?
You'll just keep an eye out in your emails. I'm not too sure yet. It will likely be like a window of time where you can take the exam. So, you can start at any time from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. this day.
Okay.
Likely, but watch your emails for that.
Yeah. Thank you.
No worries. Daniel, can you see that?
Oh, that's beautiful.
There you go. See, it's completely cut off.
Oh my God.
Thanks for reminding me. I would have definitely forgotten.
No worries.
Yeah, nasty.
Claire,
Thank you for that.
Yes, Sienna, yeah?
I have a few questions that I don't know what happened to me when you must have been speaking. For today's one, what's the normal angulation of the elbow?
10 to 15 degrees.
Okay, thank you. And I think I missed one. Oh yeah, what's the actual role of the triangular fibrocartilage complex?
It stabilizes the ulnar aspect of the wrist during radial and ulnar deviation.
Okay, beautiful. And I think last one, sorry.
That's
I missed for one of the arches. So I think hang on a second. Oh, so I got proximal and distal, and then the other one, I think I missed like the keystone and that sort of stuff for it.
The other one doesn't have a keystone. That's why the longitudinal arch, no keystone. Nothing really else to say about it.
Oh, okay. And then what about does the distal one have a keystone?
Yeah, the distal one has a keystone, the head of the third metacarpal.
Oh, so that's the same as the proximal one.
The proximal one is the capitate.
What the heck happened to me? Okay.
Just remember the proximal one goes over here, so it can't be the head of the third metacarpal.
Oh, yes, of course. Okay, I think that was it. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
Email.
with the movement analysis next week, is it gonna, I don't know if you can answer this. I don't know, is it gonna be one that we've done already or no? Or you don't?
Likely not.
Okay.
It could be, but probably won't be.
Ooh. Again, I don't know if you can answer, but will it be like a multiple choice or will it be kind of like fill it in a table sort of thing?
We're going to try and make it fill it in a table, but it's just whether that's possible online.
Okay. All right.
So it could be either. I can't say, but we're trying to make it a fill in a table. But if it's not, we can't, then we can't.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
No problem. Youngji, how are you going?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, sorry. I have some questions.
Yeah.
Would you like to go over station 2, number question 4?
Can you read it out to me?
Yep. Describe the difference between extrinsic and intrinsic ligaments of the wrist.
Yeah, so remember that I explained this. It's when a ligament within the wrist is an intrinsic ligament, so going from carpal to carpal. An extrinsic ligament comes from a bone outside of the wrist into the carpals, so like radial to carpal, radius to carpal.
Okay. Is there any source I can see for this part?
Yeah, you can Google them. You can Google that. What's an intrinsic ligament? What's an extrinsic ligament? What does that mean? Otherwise, there's a textbook as well.
Yep. And yeah, one more. This question 6. The wrist plays in the movement of the hands, like you show these types of thing. Like I got lengthen the tension.
Yeah, it's because the tendons from the muscles that move the fingers run across the wrist. So movements of the wrist are going to affect the muscles that move the fingers or the interphalangeal joints. So it's just understanding that there's a relationship between those.
Yep, cool.
But that's from the
Thank you.
textbook as well, though. You can find that in the textbook. Pretty much all of this you can find in the textbook.
Yep, thank you so much.
No
See you.
worries. Bye. Megan, how'd you go today?
Good. I was frantically taking notes the entire time.
Were you? I'm sorry if I was talking too quickly.
No, it was good. The only one that I missed was which muscles are responsible for changing the shape of the hand and maintaining the arches?
So that's the intrinsic muscles and the intrinsic ligaments of the hand and the wrist. So they're all the ones that we don't really learn about, all those little muscles inside the hand and all the little ligaments.
Cool. Easy. Thank you.
No worries. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.